There were a lot of uncomfortable conversations that I would have to have. I would call brands out and say, so you're saying that the Black audience doesn't matter to you? Wow. Because in a lot of these cases, Ebony's reader base and subscriptions were a lot bigger than a lot of these niche publications that they were loaning to. Celebrities would be on covers for niche fashion publications that would have a very small readership, but Ebony's multi-million readership was way more, and they're not loaning to them for the same celebrity. Or when they would loan, they would come around and be like, okay, we can give you some looks, but you're giving me like the scraps. You're not giving me the runway look. You're giving me like the commercial pieces that no one's using. You're giving me, not cover caliber stuff.
Marielle Bobo is one of my favorite people in the fashion world. She's an editorial and creative genius, but most of all, she has a heart of gold. And she went to Howard University. HU, had to do it, guys. Bear with me. The moments when I thought about giving up, or I had a rough day, just like Lena Horne in The Wiz, Marielle would share a personal story reminding me to believe in myself and keep going. She's worked for many publications throughout her career, from Women's Wear Daily, Allure, OK Magazine, Harper's Bazaar, Essence Magazine, Ebony. The list goes on. You may have also seen her work as the editorial director for Ayesha Curry's AC brands and newly launched Sweet July magazine and website. I had the privilege of catching up with Marielle to revisit her fashion journey, the lessons learned, and the importance of empowering the next generation. Enjoy.
Oh my goodness, Marielle Bobo. You look gorgeous. Look at that skin. Look at that hair. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. How's it going? I haven't seen you forever.
I know. It's been a minute. Oh my God. The eyebrows look great.
I have like nothing going on here.
But... Oh, whatever. Even on your worst day. Excuse me. All right. Well, thank you for coming on A Fashion Moment. I have been a fan of yours for so long, and your work ethic and just the way you style is phenomenal. So I'm really excited to get into it and see what's going on.
No, thank you for reaching out to me. I'm so excited about you and the podcast and everything that you've been doing. And I'm so honored that you would consider me and think of me for this. So I'm
Get
super
out of
excited.
here. Marielle, I can't with you. Get out of here. You're up. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's so interesting because I thought I knew your story. I thought I did. And then, I really read through your bio and I said, whoa. Where did this part come from? I had no idea. So, it was really, really, just fascinating to me. It's just every day, you're learning something new, but where did you grow up? And where did this love for fashion come from? Who are you, Marielle?
Yes, you want all the tea.
It's inspirational, our stories and just sort of how we progress through life, and where, people look at themselves and they're like, how can, they have these dreams. And when you see someone who has this amazing story of overcoming certain challenges and just, who they are in general, and we'll talk about that later as it relates to diversity in the industry, but it can really help. So I appreciate. Let's dig into your story. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up in Brooklyn. And BK. Ow. So I grew up in Brooklyn, and I had a pretty diverse background growing up. My mom is a native New Yorker, so she's American, grew up here in New York. But then my dad is Haitian. So I grew up in a very kind of multicultural household within these kind of two worlds of very kind of classic kind of Black American household, but then these like deep rooted Caribbean principles and upbringing as well. So I kind of had the best of both worlds, and it kind of informed a lot of my perspective even later on with how I approached my career and fashion. I always have kind of looked through things through a very multicultural lens. And it started, really with my upbringing of having a dad that was Haitian and a mom that, was like, had a very classic African-American upbringing, but that definitely fueled a lot of who I am today. So started out in Brooklyn. I went to Howard University, HU.
No. Yes.
Went to Howard University for undergrad. I always loved fashion. I, was first kind of introduced to fashion as a kid. Going to, the hair salon, that would be where I first kind of saw the magazines. I'd see my Vogue magazines and Elle magazines and the Glamours and Harper's Bazaar. So that was kind of where I first got to see fashion publications. Wow. And then the magazines that were in my house were kind of those storied heritage Black publications like Essence and Ebony and Jet magazine. So I always kind of grew up, with this passion for both, kind of seeing myself in publications like Essence and Ebony, but not necessarily seeing myself in the fashion publications that I loved. So, I would look at the fashion publications, and kind of that was where I first got introduced to a lot of the high-end designers and kind of the dream and all the grandeur of fashion and all the fantasy of these really over-the-top shoots. And then Ebony and Essence were more lifestyle publications, so fashion wasn't as much at the forefront, but they were places where I saw beautiful Black women who looked like me and saw our stories and our culture and our art and everything celebrated. So that was something kind of early on that sparked this passion in me to wanting to work in fashion and definitely wanting to work in magazines. And then that kind of set me on the course with what I would later, kind of go on to do. But I knew that I always wanted to work in fashion, and I always was a writer. So I wanted to do something that could kind of combine fashion, but with storytelling and journalism. So that was kind of where it started.
Well, what did you study at Howard? Like, were you practicing the writing there?
Yes. So at Howard, I was a journalism major. So, so I was a journalism major, and then they had just kind of introduced this fashion merchandising program there. So it was super new, very small program. But I picked that as my minor. So I was I was a journalism major. So I did print journalism, and it definitely wasn't magazine journalism. It was like hardcore news reporting.
Yes, you gotta have it.
So like I was like going to all the local community board meetings and covering different districts in DC and talking about politics and what was going on. So it was very like grassroots, like hardcore news reporting. And then in my minor as a fashion merchandising minor, I learned more about the business side of fashion. So there were fashion buying courses, and there were some entry level, like very kind of beginning fashion design courses. So, it was, like I said, it was a very new program. So they didn't have kind of like this fully fleshed out program, but it was just a great way to kind of also kind of lean into that passion that I had for fashion and learn about different aspects of the industry while also getting this hardcore news background. So at the time, I kind of was trying to piece together how all of these things would come together and as far as a career. But later on, all of the tools I can really say that I learned in all those different programs kind of, really helped me, and at some point have come into use later on. After Howard, I went to FIT, and I did the formal kind of fashion merchandising and buying program there as well. And that kind of helped me because that was where I really got my first job right out of school.
And what was that job, Marielle? Where did you go?
Yeah, so when I was at FIT, all the students there, you have to do an internship. So I started out as an intern working with Nicole Miller as like a PR intern. And then one day the job board at FIT, which was really, really good because they had a lot of faculty that was super, very high up in the industry. But yeah, so the job board there, one day I saw they had a posting for a fashion junior booker at Wilhelmina Models. And I knew I didn't necessarily like have this passion about working necessarily as an agent, but I was just like, it's in fashion. I just want to get in,
take
it. Once I can get my foot in the door, then I can navigate and make, connections. And that's what happened. So I got this job as like a junior booker in what was a new division that they had formed at the time called W Men. And it was, so it was for like older male models.
What?
The older was like 35 and up. So these were like, the mature, the refined gentlemen. And
I would have been like, using that as, okay, who's single, who's recently divorced. I know I'm a mess.
No, but yes. So I had this opportunity to work in this new division they had formed called W Men. It was representing guys who were 35 and over. Wow. And it was great because it was a new division there. So I got to do a lot more than someone that was entry level normally would. So I was doing everything from recruiting models, going to conventions and finding new models. I was, negotiating rates for their jobs. I was, pretty much touching every facet of the industry, working with production companies on castings, working with editors at magazines for castings for their photo shoots. And eventually that's how I then got my first job in print and magazines, was from that job at Wilhelmina.
Was it a relationship that you had with one of relationships are so important. Like how did it happen where you're like, hey,
well, what had happened,
how do you slide in there? That's the question.
Well, what had happened was one of the bookers that I worked with at Wilhelmina, she actually was a fellow booker, but she worked in a different division. She worked in the plus size women's division. Wow. And she left Wilhelmina and went to Allure magazine, and she was one of the bookings editors at Allure. So she basically was helping to book the models and recruit talent for photo shoots, from photographers to stylists and models. So she left Wilhelmina and went to Allure, and she knew that I always wanted to work in magazines. And so one day she heard that they were looking to hire a fashion assistant. And, she reached out and was like, they're looking to hire a fashion assistant. Here's who you should send your resume to if you're interested. And so I did. I followed up. I sent it to the creative director, Paul Cavaco, who was the lead there at the time. And I interviewed and I got the job in the closet as a fashion assistant. And it was very like, grassroots, like very Devil Wears Prada. Like it was very Devil Wears Prada. But I found a great mentor there and the creative director who really kind of just taught me a lot and created a lot of opportunities for me there. So that kind of set me on from that path.
That's amazing. It's so funny when that movie came out, they're like, is it really like that? I'm like, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot,
especially for me, like I wasn't, back then Condé Nast, first of all, you don't just get in at Condé Nast, especially back then, you need to be connected. You need to know someone to even hear about the jobs. And then even if you hear about the job from someone, they may already have 3 other candidates in the running who are connected. A lot of the girls that had those jobs were daughters of, designers, the niece of a certain fashion editor. They were connected. They were on the inside. And here I was like, this girl from Flatbush, Brooklyn, like didn't know anyone.
Before gentrification, y'all. This is before gentrification, okay?
And then also, once I got in, it was I was very naive. I kind of went into it just excited and eager and ready to like take on the world. But then the first day I walked in, especially back then, I mean, there's a lot more Black editors and just black women and men now in publications. But back then, this is in 2000, so I started out in 2000. So this is 20 years ago. And when I started then, like I was a fashion assistant and I was like the only fashion assistant that I saw of color. The Black people that worked there were people in the mailroom, people at the front desk. You didn't see anyone that were editors of the work that actually touched the magazine and that were helping to shape the content and the stories. So when I actually walked into that building and saw that it was only me and all the Black, the people at the front desk and security were all like, hey, sis, we see you. And I'm like, I'm just a measly assistant. I'm not even like anyone with power that has to say anything. But they were just like, yes, like one of us is here. So there's a sense of like, wow, I'm doing it. But then I learned quickly that I wasn't going to fit in, like I remember walking into that elevator for the first time and like these assistants were like head to toe, Prada, look down off the runway, like designer bags. Like I'm here with my like door knocker earrings, so Brooklyn, like my little outfit that I put together that was cute, but it wasn't a designer outfit because I couldn't afford it. I didn't have rich parents or whatever, And so, I quickly kind of went into this mode of like, wait a minute, will I fit in here? Am I even gonna be able to succeed here? I'm not like these girls. You walk into that cafeteria and that Condé Nast cafeteria was like walking into a fashion show. And like,
what a place to people watch.
Yeah, and you're just kind of like, you're in awe, but then you're also kind of doubting yourself. Here I am, like 21, 22, fresh out of school, first job, doesn't know anyone, don't see anyone that looks like me. And then I'm at Allure, which is a huge brand that focuses on beauty, but I'm the only woman of color, the only Black woman that was working there. One of the few. There was myself and then one other Black woman that was there at the time. And so that puts a lot on you where you're just kind of like, what's my place here? What's my voice here? Not really feeling empowered. But I was lucky because the creative director, Paul Cavaco, he just like early on, it's like he saw me. It was like, don't worry, like you have a voice here. You're gonna do well. I'm gonna advocate for you.
You're Nigel.
Yeah, he showed me the ropes. He taught me how to be a good editor, how to style, how to be a visionary and come up with your stories, how to approach fashion beyond just, the clothes and more about the storytelling and the emotion that it can invoke. And he was just very humble. And that was also reassuring to see because a lot of the editors, they were mean. They were mean. They were very, they talked down to you. It wasn't a very nurturing environment back then, especially for someone young and coming in from as kind of an outsider. And, but he was just like, he saw me and he empowered me and, he was very humble, He's one of the founders of KCD, which is one of the top fashion public relations companies.
Is he?
Yeah, he's the C in KCD, Cavaco. And, this is the top agency that's repped every major brand from Versace and Marc Jacobs, Alexander McQueen. And, just very humble. He worked at Vogue, for years. And he's a famed, really celebrated editor. And you see him, he was so humble. Like he would walk around in his gray New Balance sneakers and same Levi's and white button down shirt. He wore that every day. When I would be trekking home in the middle of the night, he would be there late. He would work late. And he took the subway, which back then, like those editors had Black cars that waited for them. And so he was very approachable and humble. And so I thought about that and I was like, okay, so there's a way to be in this industry where there is room to, be nice, to work in fashion and be nice and also be humble. Because I never was a person that was very like much in the forefront. Mm-hmm. I'm a person who likes to be behind the scenes and he was very much that way. And it didn't prevent him from having success. So that showed me early on that there was a space for me in this industry.
Wow. I love that. Hello, everyone. Not everyone in fashion is mean. There are a lot of folks who are, but not everyone is. That was actually, believe it or not, one of the first lessons that Daisy, rest her soul, I'm like, get a little teary because she's so great.
Yeah, we were at Howard together. We were there at the same time. We were there together. So like seeing her journey and how she came up on her path, was meant a lot too, we kind of cheer each other on. We came out at the same time and kind of navigated our way through the industry.
Yeah, and just for those of you who don't know, Daisy Llewellyn, she passed away, but she was a fashion expert, one of the first Black women I had ever seen, along with Marielle, like on the magazine side. I was like, oh my God, there's Black people here. It's a miracle. And they're nice, like actually nice people. So she always said, be nice to the person sweeping up at night, because you never know, they might need to let you in if you're working late.
Yeah.
All the way up to the top, you never know. And also the interns you work with, the people, you never know where people are going to end up later. Like some of these interns are like top editors now. So you never know.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So you worked your way up. You were, moving and shaking. So I have to ask, what are some of the characteristics that you would define in a good editor, because you've had so much practice, you've learned from the greats, you've been up, you've been down. Actually, you've only been up, at least from what I've seen, because you work so hard. You're working all the time and you do amazing work. But what are some of those characteristics of a good editor? Like, people think they know what an editor is, but it's like, you're just not picking out clothes and making people look cute, right? What is it?
I think the biggest part of it is the first part is the storytelling. I think as an editor, you have to definitely be innately in tune with the audience and approach what you do in terms of the storytelling. I think when it comes to fashion, a lot of times people just kind of get caught up in this idea of like, oh, I just want to just put on this amazing look, this runway look on a model or celebrity and just have it be this great moment about the clothes. But I think the stories that really resonate most with the readers and the visuals that most resonate with the readers are ones that are tied to the story. What's the emotion that you want to invoke through this image? What's the story of what happened behind the scenes, from the team that you're assembling to create this art and this photo, to the writer who you're choosing to, have tell the cover story of the subject that you just photographed, to the layout and how it's going to be designed and what you want the readers to take from it visually. All of those components go hand in hand. I think a lot of people just look at being a fashion editor and a stylist is just about the clothes, but if those other elements aren't there, it's going to fall flat. So it's more than just about the dress. It's what are we trying to say about the dress? What's the emotion from the model to the celebrity that's wearing it, to how it's going to be photographed? What's the set going to look like? What is the set design? What's the lighting? Is there a soft lighting or a harsh lighting that we want to use to, further the emotion around this dress and around the subject wearing it? So all of those things go hand in hand. So I think it's about the storytelling. Never lose sight of the storytelling. And that's everything from the visual, if you're a stylist or photographer, to as a writer, what's the story and how does it relate to the reader? Being really in tune with the audience and knowing, what do they want to see? What are the stories that are not being told? How can you take your unique perspective and bring it to the pages of the magazine or the website or whatever the media outlet is that you're working for? How can you have it resonate with that audience? Wow. And then I think the other piece of it too is to kind of always keep your ear to the streets and surround yourself with young people, I mean, it's important. I mean, I consider myself like, I'm kind of old. I'm like an OG now, 20 years old. And so, but with that, it's like, I can't stay in this bubble of what I think is current and what I think is relevant. It's different when you're growing up in this time and you're experiencing it as a young person in this moment. So I always, from the interns to, entry-level assistants, love to like surround myself by people who are younger than me and ask them like, what are you into? Like, from talent, a lot of times, it'll be from interns and assistants that are like, this is a new artist who's coming up who like we need to have on our radar. Like, look at what they're doing. Like, and it will be someone that I honestly have never heard of. 'Cause I'm 42 and I'm like,
what?
I'm not listening to that.
Good girl.
Oh, look at you. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's not my, like, experiencing it as a 20, like I can remember as a 20 something experiencing the culture in a way that my mom, we just wouldn't. She was in it, but it's different when you're living it and you're coming up with it and you're seeing those who are of your demographic. And so I asked I call them the kids. I asked the kids, I'm like, kids, like, what's going on? Like, who are the people that I need to have on my radar? Like, what are you into? What are you listening to? Even from a fashion perspective, it's street style, looking at what the kids are doing, how they're wearing stuff now. Looking at young designers, so I always just try to keep my ear to the streets. And now with social media, it's a lot easier to do that because I spend a lot of time just like on Instagram, just like, going through the pages and like looking at, and like finding, that's how I find a lot of new designers. That's how I find young photographers. That's how I find a lot of young stylists is just through Instagram. And young creatives now are, because of this platform, they have such an easier means to get their art out there. Like when I first started, the internet wasn't a thing. Like if you wanted to work in media, you had to work in a magazine. There were no digital publications. There were no websites. So it's also opened up the door because I feel like for this next generation, they have so many more outlets to go and they don't have to go the traditional magazine route. If anything now, digital is the way. Publications, major publications you see are cutting down how many issues they're coming out with. They're, the magazines are getting thinner and thinner and they're beefing up more content digitally. They're also doing more events and finding other ways to connect with readers beyond just print. So I think, it's an exciting time for this new generation because there's so many more opportunities. But yeah, going back to your question, I would say the other key thing would be like, surround yourself with, young people, ask questions, see what people are into, never think you're above any ideas or feedback, and keep your ear to the streets.
That's a good one.
Keep your ear to the streets, like do whatever you need to do to find out, what's happening, what's next, what's new. And that's how you always stay relevant.
That feedback part, you're never, I think that sometimes, and, I've had my own struggles, especially when you're a perfectionist and you're like, wait, what? This isn't perfect? What are you talking about? Like, did that come naturally to you? Or was that something that you sort of learned over time? Like, is that nurture or what is it? Nature or nurture for you?
I think it definitely was nurture, and I think as an artist, as a creative, like you're sensitive, like you look at it and you're just like, this is something you made. You had all of this feeling, you had a certain vision of what you wanted, or, you're sensitive about critiques and feedback, but I also welcome it because I recognize that, the times that I've had stories edited by, great, senior level editors that have taken a story of mine, they just take it to the next level and just make it so much better. A good editor can read a story and take that and just keep it still within your voice, but just elevate it and take it to a whole nother level. And there are things that they'll see in it that maybe you didn't see. And it makes you a better editor. It makes you a better writer when you have another set of eyes on it to be able to kind of help you navigate. And with styling, it's the same. When I'm on set, there have been times that I've had, interns and assistants, and I'll ask them, I'll be like, well, what do you think of this dress? Or what do you think we should put with it? And they're like, oh my God, you're asking me what I think. They're like, but I guess, traditionally, a lot of there's this fear culture of, kind of like you got to be hazed if you're an intern, you got to be hazed if you're young and you're an assistant, and, just shut up and do what you're told and don't ask questions. And we all have been there. Like I've definitely gone through my crazy things that people have asked me to do, but I do think that, you also need to be open. And so I had no problem asking and just saying like, well, what do you think? And a lot of times interns will just be like, oh my God, she's asking me what I think. And I'm like, yeah, I want to know, like, what do you think? What shoe do you think looks good with this dress? What do you think of this outfit? Are you feeling it? Nah. and
giving people
I don't
heart
feel,
attacks.
yeah, I don't feel any way about it if they're not feeling it, but it's just another perspective that I think we can all benefit from, just having different perspectives. Like, you're not going to grow if you just live in a bubble where you're just sitting within your own thoughts and what you think looks good. It's not about you. If you work in media and storytelling, you're trying to reach others. And I think that you can never really lose sight of that.
Podcasts are awesome. And I know you love them too, or you wouldn't be here right now. But have you ever thought about starting your own? Don't worry, you don't have to be a techie, but you do need a bit of guidance so you don't make costly mistakes. My name is Sunny, and I've been podcasting for a long time. I've launched more than 15 profitable podcasts, and I'm the founder of the Independent Podcast Network. My online course, How to Launch Your Profitable Podcast in 30 Days, gives you the keys to the 5 Ps of podcasting, which is everything you need to launch and grow a successful podcast. You get unlimited access to more than 35 videos and dozens of handouts. And when you purchase my course, you're also supporting this awesome podcast because they're getting 50% of the money when you use their special link. How cool is that? Let me help you get started with your podcast. Go to podcastareawesome.com/fashion. That's podcastareawesome.com/fashion.
Wow, that is amazing. It's so funny that you bring up I'll just ask them, what do you think?
Yeah, it's like,
no,
you should, it's like, oh my God, they're like shocked. But I get it, because I've been there. I've been on set where it's like, that fashion director is like, you better shut up. You better not act. Like, no one asked what you thought. Like, what do you mean? No one wants your opinion. This isn't your set. And I think there's a way to respectfully do it. I think there's a way to ask and to give feedback without seeming as though you're trying to, one up
take
your,
over.
take over and make it your shoot, so I don't have any problem asking, and just think I don't get offended.
I love it. I have to admit, one of the highlights of my fashion career was actually Ms. Goodman from Vogue came to pull in person. And I was like, oh my God, she's here. Oh my God. And, she had her signature look. And she was looking at the Lord & Taylor cashmere. And she was looking at these cashmere pants, and she looked at me and she said, Kirsten, what do you think? She held them both up, and I was like, oh my God, she's asking me. Like, it was like such a moment. I was like, okay, I'm good for life. Like, can't nobody tell me nothing. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But yeah, so you have an amazing eye. You always have the young folks around you, which I love. Is there anything else that you sort of reference, when it comes to having the eye, like, coming up with these stories? Like, where are you getting, like, do you get your inspiration from life, TV, people? Like it's almost, I almost feel like it's a designer, like every season they're doing, I'm like, I don't know how these people keep coming up with good ideas. Like, how do you keep coming up with these ideas as an editor? Like, we're going to do this story this month.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all of those things that you mentioned. I think, it starts, for me, I think it starts with what you're seeing on the runways and what the designers are putting out, but it's also really rooted in the streets and what's happening with street style. So a lot of it is like, for me, kind of like looking at what the kids are wearing, looking at what the trends are, looking at how people are putting things together and the emotion that kind of comes around that. And then it's looking at what walks down the runway and what some of the major trends are that designers are, leaning into for the seasons. And then it's kind of this collaboration of, working with the team. When I was at Ebony in Essence and I was a fashion director there, let's say we had a celebrity that we were shooting for a cover, that process could go a lot of different ways. So it would start from, what is it that they're promoting? Is there a film that they're coming out with that they're promoting that has a specific theme? Or is there, are they at this transformative kind of moment in their life where they're telling this story? They're sharing a story with readers about some, revelation or transformation that they've had. And we want to find a way to do that visually. One example that I can think of, when I was at Ebony and I was the fashion and beauty director there, we had a shoot with Alicia Keys. And it was right around the time when she first started doing her whole like no makeup look that she's been doing now for several years. But when she first kind of started with that look, in hindsight, it's kind of like, if she doesn't want to wear makeup, what's the big deal? But it was a big deal at the time. She's an A-list star. Hollywood is all about the glitz and glam. She had a very perfectly kind of like coiffed and curated image before that. And she was coming out with new music, and the whole the whole vision around her new sound and her new look was around transformation and metamorphosis, that she was at this kind of phase in her life where she felt like she was the freest that she had ever been. Wow. Not only with what she could do musically, but also spiritually and personally, where she was in her life, as a mom and, wearing all of these hats. A lot of her story at that moment was about her kind of coming out in this space of being more free and not being, kind of constricted by the industry standards. And so part of that for her was kind of letting go of the traditional thoughts of what is beautiful. So she wanted to show herself without makeup. She wanted to show herself with natural hair, her textured tresses, and just celebrate her as she was. And it also meant a lot to her too, because she talks about how she had, battles with her skin when she was younger and went through acne and things like that, which all of us go through. But when you're doing that in the public eye, people can be so cruel. Yeah. So it was also really very freeing for her to kind of show herself, without makeup, with whatever acne scars she may have had, and just bearing all. And that was a narrative that she really wanted to come across and wanted to have come across in her cover story with Ebony. So for me as the fashion director, I said, okay, well, what does that mean in terms of the visual? We're not going to just do this glitzy, shiny glitzy shoot with her where she's all done up if she's saying that's not where she is. And the story that the writer is going to be telling is about this transformation and her bearing her soul. So how can we come up with a visual around that? So for me, it was less about the clothes and more about the vibe and the feeling that shoot could evoke. So, I pull from all kinds of weird inspiration. And one of my favorite movies is the film The Last Dragon, which was a movie from the 80s about this Black guy named Bruce Leroy, who was like this big, he was like a big fan of like the Kung Fu movies from back in the day. He was a huge martial arts fan. And in the movie, he's on the search to find this thing called the glow. And the glow, wow. when he kind of manifests his highest level of, spiritual alignment, he can get this thing called the glow, where he's this untouchable fighter, where he can defeat anyone. So
that's amazing.
Yes. And Vanity was in it, and it had all these fashion books. So it's one of my favorite movies. And I was just like, when we met with her team, they kept talking about like transformation and like metamorphosis. I was like, oh my God, The Last Dragon, it's all about the glow. We got to find a way to bring that. And then at Ebony being a publication that is targeting the Black audience, I was like, this is a film that's also deeply rooted in the culture. This is a film that had an all Black cast. It starred Vanity and all of these amazing actors. And so this is a film that, like, for Black culture, there would also be another layer there of saying that the inspiration was about that film, Wow. So I wanted to have that kind of be a narrative of the story as well. And Alicia's team loved it. She loved the film. She said it was one of her favorites. And she's like, oh my God, the glow, that's sick. Where else, what other magazine would, be like, we're going to do an inspiration by The Last Dragon? A lot of editors may never have even heard of that film, because it's kind of like a cult classic. And and so that was the inspiration, and it started from me kind of like pulling still life images from the film, screenshots. And there's this scene at the end when Bruce Leroy, he gets the glow and he's surrounded by this kind of like this glow, this light energy that surrounds his body, and he kind of reaches his next highest plateau of spiritual alignment. And so I was like, we got to find a way to kind of show that visually. And so, I found this graphic designer who was actually based in Brazil, and he had all of these really cool visuals that he created where it played with this idea of like light energy and metamorphosis and transformation. And I was like, oh my God, he'd be perfect. So we did this photo shoot with Alicia in her natural hair, big curls, clean skin. The clothes were all just like very free-flowing and minimalistic. We shot it in a studio on a white background. And then we, in post, had this graphic designer do all these cool treatments where he made it look like she was transforming, literally. It looked like she was, metamorphosizing and transforming and floating and kind of defying gravity and the elements. And it was just really, really cool. It was really different for Ebony because Ebony is known as a fashion magazine. So we really wanted to kind of push the bar and do something visually that was different. And then for Alicia, she loved it because it really spoke to where she was at the time. So, so I think it's all of those things. That story was less about a trend. It wasn't about the fashion and what was happening down the runway. It started first with the subject and the story that they wanted to tell. And then from there, my job as the fashion director and creative director was to say, what's the visual story that we can create around that to, have there be that synergy. And then it's just a team effort of kind of getting the right photographer that could get the visuals we want, getting the hair and makeup team that could create the look that we want, getting the graphic designer, pulling the clothes that made sense, and all of those things. And, so it really starts, it's not necessarily driven by a specific trend. It really kind of depends on the subject. But, the subject a lot of times is what inspires the story. I'm inspired first by who we're shooting and what the message is that they want to, show. And then we kind of work in reverse and say, okay, well, then this is the fashion that needs to go with that. I think today's time is less about, when it comes to style, I think as a fashion editor, it's less about trends. I don't think people really dress in terms of trends. It's about how they feel and where they are in life. So that kind of informs a lot of the ideas. And then I kind of go backwards and say like, okay, well, what are the pieces clothing wise that make sense here?
Honestly, like I'm going to go back and watch that movie. Probably like this weekend.
It's one of my favorites.
Like immediately. Like it sounds, I'm seeing so many metaphors up in there. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
So what was it like, working for, white, predominantly white magazines and making the shift over to like the Essence and the Ebony's? Like, what was that transition like for you?
It was a big transition. So the Essence and the Ebony's and the Jets and those publications would be called kind of like, those would be dubbed like multicultural publications. And then, the Allures and the Glamours and the Vanity Fairs of the world they'd be categorized as like general market. Mm-hmm. So I started the first 10 years of my career, I was in general market. I worked at those fashion publications and worked at Condé Nast and Hearst and kind of worked my way up through the years at different magazines. But to be honest, part of why I left and decided to make the transition to Ebony and Essence was because I wasn't moving up in the way that my counterparts were. I had been, working, for 10 years at that point in my career. And at that point, I think I was like an associate editor or I think I was an associate editor or maybe like a market editor. And I was a market editor. Yeah, I was a market editor at that time. But peers of mine that had been, at other publications, white peers of mine that had been at other publications were directors already at this point. And like I said, this was pre the digital age. So there wasn't really the space to there weren't all of the digital outlets to go to and jump to get the higher titles. And the way you move up in this business is to get the titles, the title is a bartering tool. And, and I was just kind of like, I'm not going to sit here as a slave making nothing, making pennies, at Condé Nast and Hearst, for 10, 15 years and living in New York where it's expensive and I don't have rich parents that are paying my bills, it was a hard decision because I was always a fashion girl. So to me, that meant be at a fashion magazine. You want to be at a top fashion publication to make your mark. That was what I thought was the only way at that time.
Right.
If you want to make your mark in fashion, you need to be at a top fashion magazine. So that means you need to be at a Vogue, you need to be at an Elle or Harper's Bazaar. That's where you need to be. And so because Condé Nast and Hearst were so hard to get into, once I got in, I was just like, I'm not leaving because it was hard enough to get in. And once you leave, it's hard to go back. But again, like I said, I wasn't moving up in the way that I wanted to. And, I wanted to get higher titles, and there was an opportunity. The first opportunity was for me to come to Essence at the time as senior fashion editor. And it was a hard decision because I was a fashion girl and I wanted to be at a fashion magazine, not a lifestyle magazine.
Right.
I in Essence, a lifestyle magazine. And so I didn't know that I would have the same freedom to create in the way that I wanted to. Those Ebony and Essence weren't traditionally magazines where you would look in those sections and see a woman floating in the fashion pages,
Nope.
Some crazy avant-garde couture look that you could pull because it was a lifestyle magazine and there were a lot of limitations around what they thought our audience would want and what people would receive. And
it was great. I was like, go Marielle, go girl.
but I felt like, if I go there, am I going to be able to do the work that I want to do, or am I not going to be able to really be creative? But then I was like, you know what, if they're going to offer me this title, I'm going to take, working at Hearst and Condé was great because I was able to develop a wealth of contacts that I wouldn't frankly have had probably had I started out on the other side of the Ebonies and Essences. Not because the publications are lesser, but because publicists don't work with those publications in the same way. And I learned that when I made the transition. When I left Condé Nast and Hearst and went to Essence as senior fashion editor, I had a wealth of contacts. I worked with every major publicist, was going to all the shows. And then when I went to Essence, there were cover shoots. The first time when I was at Essence, I went there and we had cover shoots and publicists would say, sorry, we can't accommodate you, And the same thing happened when I left Essence and went to Ebony and became the fashion director there. It was, and I get it if it's not an A-list celebrity, but knowing what I know, I wouldn't even reach out to a luxury brand if it was someone that was not a certain caliber of talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a hierarchy of who certain brands work with. That's just the politics in fashion. But when I went to Essence and then later Ebony, these would be A-list celebrities. Let's say Kerry Washington could have been on the cover of Vogue a month ago. And then now we're shooting her for this cover, Kerry Washington as well, for the cover of Ebony. And, she was on the cover of Vogue wearing, said luxury brand. And that same brand, I would reach out to and say, hey, we're styling Kerry for the cover. I want to pull from you. And they'd be like, sorry, we can't accommodate you. And I'm
Lord.
You just dressed her for Vogue. Now you can't dress her for Ebony. This is the same celebrity. She's still an A-lister. She's still someone that you're styling for red carpets and for covers. Now you can't style her. So it was clear that it was just because it was the outlet. It wasn't that it was Kerry. It was that it was Kerry for Ebony, So there were a lot of uncomfortable conversations that I would have to have. I would call brands out and say, so you're saying that the Black audience doesn't matter to you?
Wow.
Because in a lot of these cases, Ebony's Ebony's reader base and subscriptions were a lot bigger than a lot of these niche publications that they were loaning to.
Wow.
She would be, celebrities would be on covers for, niche fashion publications that would have a very small readership, but Ebony's multi-million readership was way more, and they're not loaning to them for the same celebrity,
Wow.
So, or when they would loan, they would come around and be like, okay, we can give you some looks, but you're giving me like the scraps. You're not giving me the runway look. You're giving me like the commercial pieces that no one's using. You're giving me like, not cover caliber stuff, and, and a lot of those brands weren't advertising with Ebony and Essence anyway. And a lot of times, when you're an editor, a lot of times part of who gets the covers, the brands that get on the cover are people who's advertising with the brand.
Right.
There's the politics of that. You need to give them certain credits because they're paying for the magazine. They're paying for advertising pages.
Wow.
But at Ebony and Essence, I'm like, they're not advertising with us anyway. So why am I killing myself to try to give them credits, with these celebrities when they don't even want to accommodate us properly? So you know what? If they don't want to, if they don't want to loan to us, forget them. I'm not going to pull for them. Instead, I'm going to pull from Black designers who a lot of the times had pieces that were, way on the same level, if not better, than a lot of, these luxury brands, and could frankly benefit from having that kind of publicity way more than those luxury brands would. There were times that I would be giving major credits, cover credits to top luxury houses, and they would send me these amazing, oh my God, Marielle, like, thank you so much for our credit on Carrie. Like, we love that Carrie wore it. We love that Angela Bassett wore it, whatever, A-list celebrity. And then when Fashion Week comes around and it's time for the show, you don't want to give me a ticket to the show, or you want to give me a standing room ticket to the show. And I'm like, yeah, you want to give me a standing ticket to the show, or be like, we can't accommodate you, but I'm giving you all these credits of celebrities wearing your stuff. So I'm like, you know what? If they're not going to give us the respect for the, at the time when I was at Ebony, Ebony was celebrating its 70th anniversary. So I'm like, if you're not going to give us the respect of being this 70-year-old cultural institution, then screw you. Yeah. I'm going to highlight the brands that support us and use this as an opportunity to showcase Black designers, because a lot of these Black designers will never get to have their pieces worn on these celebrities. It's changed a lot now. There are a lot more Black stylists. So quickly. Black stylists are working. Exactly. But back then, we were pulling from all the Black brands and giving them all the credits and everything. And now, you pull up the cover of Vogue. Every major fashion publication right now is working with all Black crews. They're working with Black stylists, Black photographers. Wild. They're putting these celebrities in Black designers. I was looking at the cover of InStyle with Zendaya, and she's, Law Rocher's stylist, put her in all Black designer. She's wearing, Hanifa and all of these great designers, for the cover of InStyle. But this is stuff we were doing at Ebony and Essence all the time. And, even this idea of like, walking onto an all Black set, people are raving about it now. I'm like, that was every day. Like,
been doing it,
and it wasn't, why is that even a thing? Like, it's, why is that even a thing? At the end of the day, we're the ones creating the trends. We are the ones setting all the trends in hair and beauty, killing it. So why is it so, crazy to walk onto a set and be on a set with all Black creatives? And so, young Black photographers that we were shooting with back then are now getting covers for, these major fashion publications, and it's great. But back then, they weren't getting a cover with anyone except Ebony or Essence, and so, I hope that what's happening now continues, and is not just, kind of a trend, but a lot of, what we were doing was about necessity. When I started out, I was sipping on the fashion Kool-Aid, wanting to pull from, all of these high-end fashion brands. Oh, I got this couture look, and I'm like,
our last, honey.
Yeah. But then once I got in and saw how biased a lot of these brands were, and that they really didn't care about us, and that they didn't want to loan to us, and that they're giving us the scraps and not accommodating us at shows, the veil was quickly removed. And when I was in a position where I was now a fashion director and could kind of call the shots now and decide for myself what I wanted, who I wanted to showcase and who I wanted to give cover credits to, I, said, you know what, like, we don't need to, chase after them for, the cosign, and we're gonna go out here and we're gonna push the envelope and we're gonna highlight Black creatives and give, an outlet to Black designers. And, and a lot of people, would see the images and, we did a lot of great work because people were talking a lot about the covers we were doing and how they just were different for Ebony in essence,
Absolutely.
These were publications that, we grew up on, and they're like a cultural institution. And so to get a chance to go into those kind of brands and like reshape what people are seeing and create something new, that for me ended up being more rewarding than the cachet of saying like, oh, I'm at Condé Nast or at Hearst, where you can't really, it's hard to really make your mark and change things, as a Black woman at those brands back then, especially, I think it's changing now, but back then it was like, you really couldn't have as much of a voice. And I was able to go to, Ebony in essence and be able to really, create things and have a voice there in ways that I couldn't at the larger, mainstream fashion publications.
That is beautiful. I mean, it seems like, all it took was a pandemic and
I know,
a bunch of rioting and, protests.
People get blast. I mean,
I'm glad we're here.
Well, the thing was, it's like, with the pandemic, I mean, people were suffering in silence because I think it's a lot of different things. I think that, there's a lot more opportunity now than there was back then. Like I said, with digital and, even on the brand side, there are, editorial positions on the brand. Like everyone is moving into content now. So there's such a wide range of opportunities for you to kind of insert yourself in now before just being at a print publication. And so I think it kind of, people are not as afraid, First off, there are a lot more Black girls and Black, creatives in the industry that are working at these publications and at these digital outlets. And I think, with that larger community, you feel like there's more of you. You feel like you're more supported. And then the timing, it was just kind of like, look, what more, we're going to just come for everybody because it's long overdue, But back then,
no way.
It was just like, I was just happy to have a job. So you just kind of suffer, like you just suffer in silence. So you sit there, you deal with the crazy comments, all of the, ignorant, statements, all of the ridiculous things that happen behind the scenes. You just kind of go along with it and accept it as just, this is part of the culture. And if I want to work at these brands, like I just got to play nice. I got to go along with it. Even the disparities in pay and all the things, you don't even want to ask for anything because you're just happy to be there. I remember coming in and finding out way after the fact that like girls that I know were, in the same job were making like way more than me, but I wouldn't dare ask for anything more because I just I didn't want to ruffle feathers and I was just happy to be there because I felt like I'm one of the few, especially back then being one of the few Black girls, Daisy was one of them, Daisy was at Glamour, it was like, you better, girl, don't mess this up. If you're trying to be here, you don't want to mess it up. So you just kind of go along with it and hope for the best. And you hope that, you can eventually move up. And then when you move up, you can make your mark and do your part to change things, But I realized, after 10 years at Condé that I could either just be sitting around waiting to see if maybe I get my shot or, but who knows when that could happen, and I was just like, no, I'm not going to just sit it out. And, and then the kind of the mystique and all the allure of it started to quickly wane. And I realized it wasn't, there was more than just this. There was more than what I thought. I had such a very, a lot of tunnel vision with what I thought the opportunities were if I wanted to work in fashion. And then I realized I could do so much more and really have more impact. It became more than just about, creating these images and, especially at Ebony in Essence, in seeing kind of the reaction that people had to the shoots that we were doing and being able to have cultural conversations with with photos. I mean, we did this one cover where it was a fashion cover where we shot all these Black models, but they were all walks of life. We had, models of different sizes, plus size. We had, Deandra Forrest. We had Winnie Harlow. We had all kind of facets of beauty, all shades, hair types, everything. We shot them in all Black designers, and it was just a moment. And it was like, we are here, and and then later on, Ebony is a magazine that talks about the issues. So there were different covers that we had to execute that were politically charged. And so then it was like, okay, well, how do we create that story? How does fashion play a role in telling this story that matters to us? I remember for Ebony's 70th anniversary, we did a cover with, this was around the whole like Trayvon Martin and all of that. Yeah. And we did this cover with Harry Belafonte. Oh, he looked yeah, it was like Harry Belafonte, Zendaya, and Jesse Williams. And we wanted to have, Black folks from different generations who have used their platform to speak out on different issues. And, Zendaya was someone at the time who had dubbed as someone who, represented the next generation. And this girl, even though she was super young, was unafraid. Around that time, that was when she had the whole run-in with Juliana Rancic. She wore the locks. She wore the faux locks, and she was talking about her hair. And Zendaya spoke out about that and wasn't afraid to challenge, this high-profile TV personality at such a young age. Jesse Williams, who has, used his art and his platform to speak out. And then, of course, Harry Belafonte, who even in his 90s is still, such a leader for the culture. And, and we did this great visual where it was kind of a play on the Black Panther movement. They were all Black. They wore black leather. Zendaya wore the beret. And, so there were cool elements.
Did you get a hug from Harry?
I did. Yes. Got hugged, got pictures.
Yes, honey.
Yeah. So those are the moments where it had even more meaning for me working with our legends, working with people that have literally changed the culture, that it meant more to me than just like any couture dress that I could throw on a model. And so that was really where I kind of started to see that I could make an impact in my own way, and that kind of informed everything that I wanted to do from that point on. Later on, after leaving Ebony, I went back to Essence as fashion director and started an initiative called Fashion House there. That was really about empowering Black designers and Black creatives in fashion, just in going to fashion shows throughout the years. I mean, you know how it is. It's invite only. Yep. It's not something that outsiders can go to. And, for any young Black creatives that want to work in the industry, if you don't know anyone, you can't even get your foot in the door. And I wanted to create Fashion House as a platform that allowed us to be able to get in. It was an event that was free of charge. They could come and not only witness fashion shows, but we had panel discussions with different Black creatives in fashion, from stylists and photographers to all kinds of behind the scenes people that touch fashion. We had a fully shoppable marketplace where you could go and actually, support Black-owned brands and buy their pieces. And the runway piece really meant a lot because, again, Fashion Week is very political. It costs thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to produce these shows. And if you're a new designer, you don't have that kind of capital. And, and then even if you're able to somehow strum up the money, getting the right people to come to the shows, trying to connect with buyers and people that can actually help you build your brand. It's not worthwhile for a lot of young brands to spend that kind of money and not really get the return on the investment. So Fashion House was this platform where, we would invite designers, say don't just show up with your clothes. We're going to give you models. We'll give you hair and makeup. We'll produce it for you. We'll give you a forum to show. All you need to do is bring your clothes. And we will, market it. We even had a VIP hour that we invited buyers to, where they could meet with the designers and make those connections that they're not able to make on their own. And, in a year of being there, we did 3 of them. We did them in different cities. We did them we did it in New York during Fashion Week twice. We brought it to New Orleans at Essence Festival. And then I brought it to Nigeria to Lagos Fashion Week and pulled from a lot of African designers, which was great. So, I really also wanted to kind of lean into this global audience, of Black folks. And working at Ebony and Essence, I always felt like a lot of the content was very Black American focused. Mm-hmm. And, being someone who also has Caribbean descent, I was like, well, but our stories are so nuanced and our backgrounds are so nuanced. And what about those of us in the Caribbean? What about those of us in South America? What about those of us in Europe? What about those of us on the continent? There needs to be more connectivity. There's a massive global audience of Black folks. And if we could really lean into that, imagine what a force we could be. So a lot of it for me was about also like reaching out into this global audience and highlighting Black creatives throughout the diaspora, not just based here in America, but all over the world, and kind of leaning into this kind of global community of fashion.
Totally random question, but who are you into? Like, who are some of your favorite, like, designers abroad? I have my list. I know you're like, that wasn't on the question list, Kirsten.
No. That's such a hard question.
I love me some Christy Brown. And I love me some Maxosa. I was so excited to see him. Oh my God. I'm like obsessed. Watch out, Missoni. Watch out.
Another one of my favorites, I would say, is a great designer named Loza Maliombo. She is from the Ivory Coast. And
gold.
She does those kind of mask emblems that she puts.
Beyonce was wearing the video. Black is King. I was like,
Yeah, it was so exciting to see that video because so many of those brands were brands that we have been working with and pulling for a long time, and it was just exciting to see them on such a massive scale, and to see them get the love that they deserve, because it's a struggle for any young designer, but especially for Black designers, they just don't get the support or visibility. So to have your pieces worn on such a massive scale with such a megastar, I just hope that for all of those brands that it just continues to bring them, so much more visibility and success, and that people, really start to give them their props, because they're doing some really amazing things. Even this whole idea of like sustainable fashion, a lot of the African brands, they're rooted in the sustainability. A lot of their manufacturing practices, it's all about, designing in smaller quantities. A lot of it is a lot of handwork and beadwork. So a lot of African companies by nature are sustainably run. So I'm hoping that even within that, as people are thinking more about the environment and more ethical production practices, that there's a space there for a lot of the African brands that have been doing it for a long time to really come to the forefront also.
So, I have to ask you, what are you up to now? Where are you? What are you doing?
Well, I'm doing a lot.
Per usual.
I'm doing a lot. I've been consulting. It's exciting because actually when I started doing Fashion House at Essence, it was kind of like this passion project that I had, after just kind of like being around and saying like, Black designers, they just don't have a space. Really Brandis in Harlem's Fashion Row was like the space that was carved out for Black designers. But I just really felt like there was no major publication that was also kind of taking that on. And I'm like, Essence, this is the magazine where, the tagline is where Black women come first. And I said, we have to do more to be entrenched in fashion. For Black women, fashion is part of who we are.
We love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, we got to do more.
It's our thing.
So we, dreamt up this idea of creating an event. But through doing that, it turned into a lot of brands outside of what I was doing with Fashion House, saying like, just needing nurturing and needing direction as far as creative vision. For a lot of these designers, they just don't even know what they should be doing. Again, they don't have the resources. They don't have a network of people to consult with and to kind of guide them. And there are certain things that we as editors know that are going to resonate with brands. Basic things like you need to have a lookbook. This is what it should look like.
A lookbook? What is that?
Yeah. And then it's like, then they do the lookbook and the lookbook looks kind of bootleg. The models,
the lighting.
The lighting is bad. The models are not on the level.
Wow.
Like all of these things. But this matters because if it's not presented a certain way, you're not even going to be in the running. You can't then send that to the buyer at Saks, the buyer at Net-a-Porter, the buyer at Macy's, and then expect them to want to take your collection seriously. So it starts from there, but a lot of them don't know these things, and they don't have the resources necessarily to be able to kind of do it on their own. So it kind of started from, me working with a lot of folks, just, pulling these brands through the years and knowing a lot of these designers, just, supporting them, putting them in the magazines. And then when we created Fashion House, I said, this is a platform where we can really directly connect them to the consumers because it was a consumer-facing event. And we're introducing this whole audience to a whole realm of brands that they've never even heard of. A lot of, most of the attendees had never heard of the brands that we were featuring, because they're small independent brands. So from there, it turned into a lot of brands like kind of hitting me on the side, like, hey, can you help me with this project? I'm trying to put together my website or even basic things like what should my social media look like? These things matter. And a lot of brands just don't know, and they don't have the guidance of someone that could kind of direct them. So so it kind of started with Fashion House and kind of turned into, all of these folks kind of, coming to me, but it was something I was passionate about. So I was excited to, kind of work with them and consult. And then, all of the civil unrest happened, this year.
Wow.
And then it turned into a lot of larger brands reaching out and saying, what do we need to do? And me not only being a Black woman, but having worked on at both mainstream general market publications and at publications that are specifically targeting the Black audience. Many of us in the industry don't have the experience of having been at both, and I spent the first 10 years of my career, at the Condé Nast and the Hearst. And then the second 10 years of my career has been in Black media.
Wow.
So, I realized they found a lot of value in that. And so then I had a lot of, larger brands kind of coming to me and consulting on different diversity.
What do we do? What do we do?
Yeah, like, oh my God, out of panicking, we need to do something. What do? We don't want to mess it. We don't want to mess it up even more.
We don't want to mess it up.
We don't need to mess it up anymore. So, like, what do we need to do? So, coming to me and, in distress, looking for guidance and wanting direction on what they should be doing. So that has become a whole thing. And then now I'm getting ready to start working on a new project that I can't quite yet announce, but there will be something that
we'll keep our eyes open.
Something that I'll be announcing shortly that I'm excied about as well. So so that's
if I see your face on an HBO show, Marielle, I can't.
No.
Okay, I can't. You, Shiona,
no.
Crew. Where's Rajni? Rajni.
Everyone is doing such amazing work. I mean,
it's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think, this has been a difficult year and a difficult time for everyone. But I think that for those of us, Black women in the industry, I think like we feel even more empowered. We already knew we were fly, but literally now everyone is coming to us. Like, if you're a Black woman in fashion or a Black woman in media right now, like you got the golden ticket.
That's right.
It's true. And it's like, I've always been a very behind the scenes person and not someone that puts myself out there. And I do the work because it's something I'm passionate about. But in my mind, I'm like, nobody, like, why would anyone want to come to me and ask me what I think? That's how I look. I'm just like, I'm just doing my job, But in this moment with everything that's been going on, over the last, these last several months, it's really been, it's just kind of empowered me even more, to really kind of step into that space of like, no, you know what? Like, there's a value that I bring that, brands need to, it's about time. You do need to come to me to figure out what you need to do to get it together. Because y'all have not been doing it, and so this is a great time, like for Black women in media, Black women in fashion, it's exciting to see so many of us creating our own platforms, you with this podcast, and
I said, why not? Why not?
You know,
but all of us work so hard, you know, just, I don't know, not one Black woman in the industry, media, fashion, who is still doing what they're doing and hasn't literally worked their tail off. Like, I mean, regardless of being passed up for a million promotions and not getting paid, you know, our worth, but it's like, you're good. That's why. So I'm glad that people are finally realizing, wow, you know, wow, these Black women actually know what they're talking about because they've worked, you know, twice as hard as everyone else to stay here. So.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, you know, we have to, we literally have to work twice as hard. You know, we have to do so much more than anyone. And that's an asset. I mean,
absolutely.
In these 20 years, I've done like every job. I've done every job you could think of. And it's funny because when I talk to people, you know, when you're in the moment, you're just kind of doing the job. You're not thinking about it. You just do what's needed, you know? And, but when I talk about it to people and they're like, oh, so, you know, what do you do? Or they ask me about different aspects of my career, as I'm listening to myself, I'm like, it's a lot of what, you know, like I'm doing a lot. I'm wearing all the hats, you know, and so are all the other Black women I know too. Like we're all wearing all the hats. And we don't have the luxury of being able to kind of just like sit on the sidelines and, you know, delegate or wait for opportunities to come to us. You know, we have to be proactive. We have to create opportunities for ourselves. We have to multitask. You know, you're juggling so many things of trying to carve out your space, especially in this industry. And then you're just dealing with like what it means to be a Black woman and everything that comes with that, you know, and having to also carry that with us while we're trying to navigate life and navigate what can be a very difficult industry that doesn't always embrace us. And so, you know, it's tricky trying to kind of navigate your space and also, you know, wear all of these hats, but then not be deemed as the angry Black woman or not right. You know, and so it's exciting to see like, you know, Black women are just like owning their spaces, creating new spaces. You know, and as I look at what everyone's been doing over this time, like, you know, I keep seeing new things popping up and I'm just like, like, go ahead. Yay! And then even just seeing all these appointments, I mean, like Black women are getting major you know, these major not even just directors, but, you know, editor-in-chiefs and, you know, these major, you know, at this moment in time, I don't think that there's ever been this many Black women heading up major brands in top C-suite roles in media and fashion than there's ever been. I mean, I feel like every time I, you know, look, there's a new appointment being announced and it's a woman of color. So it's exciting. You know, I feel like brands are, you know, there is a great reckoning happening and brands are realizing that they have to get it right. And they have to, you know, not only hire us, but hire us in positions where we can actually win and have say, you know, put us in senior roles where we can actually change the culture and make, you know, really, really do the work and make our imprint. And, you know, I just hope it continues. You know, I hope it doesn't just end, end this year and then go back to business as usual. Even with the covers, I mean, it's like every cover is a Black woman on the cover. And then it's not just only a Black woman on the cover. It's a Black.
Open it.
and content, the stories. I mean,
advertising. I was like, what
advertising?
Essence magazine, but I feel like I'm
stories. I mean, my former colleague at Essence, Julie Wilson, who's now the beauty director, at Cosmo, and is so amazing. I mean, I was looking at the current issue and they did this amazing beauty story where she talks about all the head coverings that Black women wear to go to bed. And like all the Black girls were like, yes,
stop it. Right.
Yeah. And it was like the bonnet. Yeah. It was the silk scarf. It was like all the stuff that we know, all the things that we know that like you never see in a mainstream general market magazine. And so but this is what happens when you put Black women in these roles, because that is part of beauty, you know.
Sure is every day.
Why would that not be a story that at some point would be told, you know? And But if you don't, you have a Black woman there that she knows that. And so she's going to say, this is, we need to talk about this,
That's amazing.
So,
I'm looking that up too. I'm like,
yeah,
let me put that on my list.
So it's like, these are the nuances. It just makes for a more interesting, I think it enhances, it's a win across the board.
Absolutely.
It makes the brands better. It serves the readers. And even if it's not something that is your reality, it's just good to know about it.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's just interesting. I think as a storyteller, you need to know about all stories. It's not just about your story, even as an editor. I mean, when I was at Ebony and I was a fashion and beauty director, I would go to beauty events, that highlighted products for women of all backgrounds. I didn't just go to the Black hair care brand launches. I went to the launches for all hair types,
Wow.
but a lot of the white beauty editors didn't necessarily go to the Carol's Daughter launch or the, Miss Jessie's launch or the, Black hair care brand launches. They would send, the token Black editor to cover it, and I think you're doing yourself and the magazine a disservice. If you're a beauty editor, you need to know about beauty for all women.
Yeah.
If you're a fashion editor, you need to know about all brands, not just the luxury brands. You need to know all price points. You need to know a range of designers from different backgrounds. You need to know all of it. If this is what you do, you need to have a wide scope. And in order to serve your reader, you need, you're coming in and you're, the magazine is basically this funnel of information that is being shaped by the editors. So if you have an editor that has a very closed viewpoint, that's what you're going to see in the magazine.
Wow.
But if you have an editor that's coming in with a broad perspective, that's learning about all things, it's just going to make for better content in the magazine, and it's going to serve more women. It's going to serve more readers, and people, are going to feel like they're reflected in the pages, which just creates a better experience overall. And I think that as journalists, that's what we're supposed to do. Whatever your piece in the cog is, whether you're creating the fashion, whether you're creating the beauty, whether you're writing the features, we all need to kind of approach it with a broad perspective. And I think people are being forced to do it now. You're seeing a lot of editors and maybe never heard of these brands. They're learning about 4C hair.
They're learning now.
They're learning about 4C hair.
Yeah.
They're learning about how to take out tracks. They're learning about all this stuff that they never even thought about or considered, or would just kind of toss it off to the the editor of color and have them be the one to write the story. But if you're a good writer, you should be able to write about anything. And I think it's challenging. It's challenging editors to just be better, and I think that that's a great thing.
I love that. And, I knew things were changing when I saw the St. John's ad and they had two Black girls with like braids.
Yeah.
And like hoops.
Yes.
With their tweed.
Yes.
And I said, oh my God. Well, number one, I was like, I want that outfit for next spring. But I was like, is that a girl with like braids? I mean, I have, and then Victoria Beckham, London Fashion Week, had some models with like natural hair. London, Victoria Beckham. I mean, I love me some Posh Spice, but I was just totally just like, okay, this is a new day. Like, this is really happening.
Representation is everything. And I think as journalists, you're in a privileged position where you're able to shape culture through the work that we're creating. The content and the stories we write and the shoots that we produce, that stuff is going to live on forever. The work that we create it's going to live forever. Those stories, those pages, it's out there. And I think, if people don't feel themselves represented, what does that say? And I think for, when you, like what you said with St. John, it's like, St. John has always been a brand that's been positioned visually as a brand that's for a certain kind of woman, a certain kind of price point, a certain, cut from a certain cloth. And so to see a Black woman with natural hair and a Black woman with cornrows, and two at that, not just a token one Black girl, that opens the pool of people who would now feel like, oh, maybe I can be a St. John's consumer. Maybe that brand is for me. So it's a win across the board. I think for brands, it opens them up to a whole pool of consumers that maybe they have been, Xing out of the equation. And I think for the audience and for readers, there's a sense of empowerment. There's a sense of validation in being able to open up that magazine and see yourself. You know, when I was a girl growing up, and, you know, the only place that I saw myself was in Ebony and Essence. And I got to see myself on occasion. You may see the token Black girls here and there in the fashion magazines. But it's great to now be able to look at those magazines and see us not just in the fashion pages on the inside of the book, but on the covers, and all different shades of us, and different body types and hair types, and, you know, all of the different layers, you know, to us. And I think, you know, not just for Black women, but for all women, and especially women of color, you know, that's important. So I think, you know, I'm very hopeful that this continues, and that, you know, brands see the value in it. Because it's also good business. You know, if you want to just break it down to just like dollars and cents, which sadly, you know, we live in a capitalist society, so it is what it is. Yeah. But it's also good for business. You know, Black women spend money, you know, especially.
I'm budgeting it out right now. I got my eyes on a few items right now.
Yes, we spend money. So, you know, why not market to us? You know, why not market to us? And beyond, you know, just Black women, just women in general, and multicultural women. I mean, we live in a multicultural global society, and, you know, the pages of the magazines and advertisements should be reflective of the world we live in. You know, we live in a global society, and I think, you know, it's high time that, you know, brands get with the program. So
I love it. Well, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. I'm excited to see it. I'm like, let's do this.
Yes.
So this is a fashion moment. And one thing that I like to end with all my guests is to ask them what their favorite fashion moment of all time. It doesn't have to be, it can be personal or professional or both, but just a moment that was just very magical for you in fashion.
Such a hard question. I would say I'll pick a career moment. My favorite fashion moment professionally, I would say, was, it's hard because there's so many, but I would say at Essence, we did a cover shoot where it was, we did 3 covers, and it was Iman, Sierra, and Tiana Taylor. This was for Essence's, I think it was like the 25th anniversary of Essence Festival. And we did this cover shoot where we wanted to celebrate Black women from different ages, and Black women that we felt represented different things. And first of all, being on set with Iman, like legend, you know, like that was just like, oh my God. Watching her at work, and how she moved, and just like knew her body and her angles, you know, it was just, you know, a study in perfection. But then I think the other favorite part of the shoot, beyond also getting to work with Sierra and Tiana Taylor, was just kind of the behind the scenes story of it. We did that shoot. It was super last minute. As you know, because I'll be hitting you up all the time with these last minute, you know,
yes,
trying to
you would.
You know. So in true form, this was, again, last minute. But it was, we wanted to really kind of push the global conversation around Essence and speaking to Black women throughout the diaspora. So it was important for me to have a range of designers that were really reflective of that. So we only had about 3 days to pull this shoot off. And we shot it over 2 days. We shot it in New York, and then we did a day of shooting in LA. Wow. And but we had like 2 days to get all the clothes in. And when I say get all the clothes in, I mean from London to Sweden to Ghana, to Nigeria. You know, we reached out to Black designers from all over the globe. And it was basically like this last minute request, you know, hey, we're shooting Iman, Sierra, Tiana Taylor, but we need the stuff here in 2 days. And, you know, a lot of these are small Black brands, so they don't have the crazy budgets to be shipping stuff all over the world to New York. So we covered all of the, you know, shipping costs. Wonderful. And, you know, but we even had brands who were just so flattered and honored and just humbled to be considered, and wanted to have their pieces worn on Iman. So, I mean, I had designers that hand carried pieces that got on planes. Like literally there was a designer that got on a plane and flew her daughter from Ghana to New York City to hand carry the pieces. She came and like met me at the fashion closet with the bags of clothes and,
beautiful.
you know, and so just kind of like, that was a moment because of all of what went on behind the scenes beyond, you know, obviously working with these, you know, amazing women. It was also being able to celebrate Black fashion and have this, you know, it was like that set was insane. I mean, we had like racks and we had maybe 40, 50 racks of clothes of all Black designers.
Wow.
You know, we also wanted to have a real conversation around Black hair. So we dreamt up all of these, you know, really special moments with hair. And Iman, you know, we wanted to be a celebration of braids. So she had these like kind of like waist length braids. But then we said, how can we elevate them? And, you know, so her hairstylist, you know, went and added rings and circles and beads to the braids. And it just was really cool. And then for Sierra, we wanted to do locks. So we did these faux locks on her and, you know, said, but how can we, you know, take them to the next level and really, you know, kind of elevate them and do something new. So then it was, you know, dreaming up embellishments and things to do with the locks. And then for Tiana Taylor, it was all about the afro. So we did this like gigantic afro on her and, you know, but then not only was it about the hair, the texture of the hair, but then we also played around with jewelry and we took, you know, necklaces and put like a necklace in the afro and put, you know, put earrings in the afro. And, you know, it just was, you know, great because, you know, creatively what we were able to do with, you know, that shoot was just, you know, so amazing. And then, you know, the images just came out so beautiful. Tiana Taylor was there with her daughter, her husband, and, you know, so they had all these, you know, adorable moments on set and just kind of seeing this beautiful young Black family was great. And then, you know, we pulled it off in such a short amount of time. And then the cover ran during Essence Festival and we had it. It was like the visual, we used those visuals at all of the different events at Essence Festival. And, you know, attendees just responded so well to it and people loved it. And so that was like a big standout that I would say. But there's so many, you know, I would say the shoots that stand out have been the ones for me where I've gotten to work with a lot of our icons. And then, you know, like there've been people like Denzel Washington, and, you know, Denzel.
Did you get a hug from Denzel too?
Of course. Shaka Khan. You know, Shaka Khan.
Did she hit a few notes on set?
She did. You know, Angela Bassett, the late and great Chadwick Boseman. I got to style him for when he played James Brown in the film Get On Up. I styled him for Ebony. So, I mean, there's so many, you know, amazing celebrities I've gotten to work with. And then there's just guerrilla style shoots. I mean, there was one shoot that I did. It was kind of impromptu. I was going to Nigeria for Lagos Fashion Week. And while I was there, I was just like, there's no way I can't be in Nigeria and not like do a shoot. But I had no team. I didn't have anyone with me. I was out there by myself. And I just found people. I just like, you know, while I was going to the shows, you know, I met a young stylist and he ended up assisting me and helping me on set. When I was, you know, he then, in fact, he then connected me to a photographer, a young, you know, Nigerian photographer. You know, I pulled from all of, you know, the designers that were out there showing, and these were designers from throughout the continent. So that was great because we had designers from all over Africa, all different countries. And so I was like going to the shows and then I was running backstage, pulling the clothes off the models and being like, okay, I'm going to use that in my shoot. Yeah, thanks. Got that look, you know. And then the day of the shoot, you know, the models that we used were models from the shows. Like we just did a casting. I was like, y'all going to be you're going to be in this shoot tomorrow. And they're like, oh, great, you know. And then like the makeup and hair, it was like we pulled the makeup and hairstyles that were working on it. It was like, you're going to do the makeup and hair tomorrow, you know. And then we shot very guerrilla style. We got like a van and we were like hopping out at different locations throughout Lagos. And we had the model like got dressed in the back of the van and like, you know, we just like hit the streets. But, you know, it was super guerrilla style, but it was great. And the images came out stunning. And then it just was exciting to get to work with a whole crew of creatives, you know, that were international that I wouldn't have ordinarily gotten to connect with. And they were all super young and like, you know, it was just great. So that would be another moment. So I would say that Lagos, Nigeria shoot, because for the guerrilla kind of nature of it and the fact that I got to work with this whole crew of like really, you know, young, the next kind of generation of visionaries. And then the other shoot would be that Essence shoot with Iman, Sierra, and Tiana Taylor, because it just was so legendary, epic. And it was like a blackity, black. The blackest of the blackest.
Me and my friends say that sometimes. We're like, it was blackity, black. Before it became cool.
Oh, Lordy. but before it became cool.
Exactly.
Before all of the brands started recognizing that they need to get with the program.
Yeah.
We were doing it, and we were always validating each other and celebrating each other. And so those are, I would say, are two standouts. But there's so many, but those would be my top two.
I love it. Thank you so much, Marielle, for being on the show. You are, I mean, just the course of your career is just so inspirational. And you are definitely one of the hardest working folks I've ever witnessed with my own eyes.
That's that Haitian.
I'm like, my goodness.
My dad had 50 jobs. So that's that Caribbean. Like, okay.
Like, Marielle, hello? I'm still at the office, Kirsten. I'm like, of course you would be. Of course you would be. Well, I hope during this time, you know, you're getting a little rest. I'm sure you're still, you know, hitting the pavement and doing your thing. But, you know, as always, you're always welcome on A Fashion Moment. You are always welcome back. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you. I'm so proud of you and so excited for your podcast and so excited to have followed your journey as well and seen your growth and your transformation. And I'm super excited that you've decided to step out and do this. I think it's so long overdue and very needed. And thank you for all your support through the years and all of your hard work, because I know you've been out here grinding too. Woo! And I wish you continued success. And thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining me for this week of A Fashion Moment. If you like what you hear, we'd love for you to join our community of listeners and spread the word about the show. We also want to hear from you. Share your favorite fashion moments and dream guests with us by sending an audio clip or email to afashionmomentpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can tag us on Instagram at A Fashion Moment, and you could be featured on next week's episode. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and let us know what you think. Until then, see you next time for another Fashion Moment. Podcast production by Rebecca Rashid and John Taylor Williams. Digital media production by Megan Porras.
This recording carries a Creative Commons 4.0 international license. Thanks to Patrick Patricios for their song, Hot Coffee.